books. And Memphis is still bad. They've still only got one win as Salt Lake tramples over. But we also have one of the biggest upsets with Arizona taking down the Orlando Apollos. Week 6 has been a lot of fun, but now we're going to jump right on into it because today we have great news to talk about, from a player signing with the AAF to everything that has happened over the weekend with the Alliance of American Football Games. Let's turn it over to John real quick so he can tell you about what happened during the game that we just saw finish.
Thank you, Kevin. Well, actually, the game is actually still being played, but it was a tale of two halves, or at least it has been so far. These guys are just kind of playing seesaw, do-si-do here. Neither team was really moving the ball at all, and then all of a sudden, out of the Roman candle they came. The offenses have kind of woken up and then gone back to sleep and woken up, and Perez looks like Joe Montana one play, and Jay Cutler the next. And ditto for Berkovici. He's channeling his inner week 5 and week 1 all in one game here in week 6. So, it's been a good back and forth game. There's been a lot of great third down and fourth down pickups between these two as they trade leads back and forth. We've got about 4 minutes to go. Guy down right after another fourth down long conversion here in the fourth quarter. 4.5 to go, and it's an exciting game. Both teams could use this win. Obviously, Iron started 3-0. They don't want to go 3-3 after that. San Diego, everybody's preseason darling. Started off kind of slow. Obviously, had some quarterback musical chairs going on, but then really picked it up. And then last week, game of the year. And here they are at a pivot point of their season right here. This is, this could really determine whether or not they see some postseason, because it looks like the Commanders and the Hotshots are starting to play some really good football here. And if they fall a game or two behind, it might be all she wrote for them. But I guess we'll get a final score in about 4 minutes. It's been a great game.
All right. Thank you, John. Now let's turn it over to Michael. He's going to tell you about the upset of the weekend with Orlando and Arizona.
I think upset of the weekend is probably an understatement. Honestly, it's probably more like the upset of the year so far. Even over the Atlanta game, a couple weeks ago when they beat Birmingham, mainly because of the fact that Arizona has looked dreadful the last 2 weeks. Outside of the second half last week against San Antonio, when they outscored them 25-3, Arizona had been looking lethargic. They started out 2-0, they lost 3 straight games, like that. And then they played this week against Orlando, and everybody thought Orlando was going undefeated. For the most part, Steve Spurrier had that offense playing really well. The defense was turnover prone, like they were ball hawking in that secondary. But they got kind of exposed a little bit this week with Arizona. John Walford played a really, really good game, and I think that what we saw was that the Hotshots, who were the preseason favorite, have a lot of grit to them, and they're not going to just roll over despite a few poor performances. And I think that when you see Orlando I think Orlando kind of just played it kind of too safe. Garrett Gilbert wasn't making a lot of the throws down the field. He didn't have a lot of the same connection with Charles Johnson that he'd been having. And it's sort of, I think Arizona's game plan really just kind of rocked Gilbert a little bit, and they were able to get pressure on him. And that might be the key to beating Orlando from here on out.
Definitely. Gilbert has shown poise throughout almost every game, whether it be rain in Birmingham or snow in Salt Lake. Gilbert has shown a lot, but this weekend, the pressure got to him. Now, Coach, you caught on the San Antonio game. Tell me a little bit about that game.
Just a situation where San Antonio, now we want to talk about, we want to talk about the Commanders and Atlanta.
The Commanders and the Fleet, I believe.
No, San Antonio and Atlanta is correct.
Oh, it is? My bad. That's
Yep.
my bad.
Yep.
All right. Anyway, just making sure. Anyway, it was one of the first of all, another game that's another ball game that was supposed to be close. The AAF is still lucking out with close ball games, this being one of the few lopsided games. But San Antonio came out with, vengeance to play some good football right at the beginning of the game. And then with the Aaron Murray turnovers, 3 turnovers against 1 touchdown. Even though he did finish the evening over 70% passing, turnovers really cost him, and San Antonio was really able to take advantage. One thing, San Antonio, Logan Woodside had an efficient 17 for 23 with 165 yards and 2 touchdowns. They didn't get as much out of the running game as they probably expected, but it was evenly spread out with the 80 or 85 yards, whatever they had combined from the running back crew. And one thing that stood out in Atlanta this week, along with Murray throwing it to the other team most of the game, just nothing dynamic in the passing game from the wide receiver core from Atlanta. So, it doesn't really matter how much you throw it around the lot if you're just throwing it to some average Joes. You need some guys out there to make some plays. So San Antonio came out ready to rock and roll and took advantage of Atlanta's just lack of preparation and turnovers and finished them off 37-6, man.
Definitely. Atlanta and San Antonio have had 2 different seasons. San Antonio being stellar at the beginning and then dropping off and having kind of up and down season. Atlanta with everything they've gone through. So it's going to be interesting to see how the rest of the season plays out for both of them. But now we're going to talk about Salt Lake City and Memphis. Another week with a battle of the 2 worst teams in the league. Memphis, they thought they found their pick with Zach Mettenberger at quarterback, but he went down early in the game and he never really got his footing. Even when he came back off and on, they had to go to the backup, and he showed promise. He really did, but it wasn't enough to overtake Salt Lake. They got down way too early, and they just could not get it back. The defense could not stop Salt Lake. The one thing that I have to talk about Salt Lake is about Woodrum. I saw a few times during the game, anytime he would drop back into the pocket, he would stand there, like literally feet planted and just looking around, like no movement, no bouncing around, kind of like moving up, moving back, side to side. He was sat in one position, and he threw it and he made completions. He was easy with it. But I find that very, very cautious because he's sitting there, just standing there, and he can get hit at any time. And sometimes he would bounce around a little bit, move up and down the pocket, but most of the time I saw him just standing there, and it confused me on why. But he was able to make every throw in that position. He was able to get it to his tight end a bunch of times, which even in the broadcast, they said that the tight end was more like Jordan Reed of the Washington Redskins. They say he's a tight end, but he's really not. And it kind of looked like it. It doesn't look like he's as big as what a tight end would be. He looks like more of a bigger field kind of wide receiver. But he's elusive as hell, and he made a lot of throws. A lot of catches in very good areas. And Woodrum showed off. He was able to take Salt Lake to the win over Memphis. Now, kind of want to go into that real quick. With Memphis, one of the biggest news stories to drop in the football world this week, Johnny Manziel signed a contract with the AAF. Now, at first, it wasn't dropped that he signed with Memphis. It just said AAF, and everyone was wondering. But then it came out that he signed with Memphis, and it took it by storm. You have the worst team in the league picking up a very highly talented quarterback with a lot of issues off the field. He's undersized. He uses his legs way too much, but he has a decent enough arm. But I kind of want to take it to John because, John, you've pointed out a couple of very interesting points with Johnny about San Antonio not picking him up and it kind of being a weird instance for you. Tell us about what you think this means for Memphis having Johnny and the whole thing around him.
Well, I don't like, okay, so they've got this player allocation system, and because he was an Aggie, he went to Texas A&M. San Antonio obviously held his rights if he would have ever became available to play in the AAF. They had first dibs. Now, okay, the logic states we've got a quarterback, we're playing fine, we're red hot, we've got a great defense. Why ruin what we got? It ain't broken. We're not going to fix it. We'll pass on Johnny. So they waived their rights for their allocation, holding on his particular claim, and allowed the next team up. It goes by, worst record first, which is in fact Memphis. It allowed them to essentially pick him up, but essentially that's given another team, another opponent, a freebie. And I was kind of wondering, why in a league where attendance might be a little bit of an issue, and of course wins and losses are definitely an issue for some teams. Losses, for Memphis, obviously. We know they need a quarterback. They're playing musical chairs with everybody with Berg and Burger in their name out there in Memphis, and nobody's coming out to see him anyway. So, knowing that they need a guy like Johnny to not only get maybe some more intrigue for the league and people in the seats, but to hopefully generate a couple of wins for Coach Singletary before the season ends here and end the season hot. Why not grab him up and use him as a little bit of a trade bait? And, I was talking about it, and somebody, pretty much let me know that the league is trying to be fair in their player allocation system, and they're trying to, since they know Memphis needed a quarterback, maybe that they kind of told San Antonio, don't claim him. We're gonna let him go to Memphis, and that's all fine and dandy. That's nice, but they should advertise that that's what they're doing, that they're going to just be fair and play high stakes intramural football, which is what that essentially makes this transaction. It's an intramural league. We're all classmates here. We're just kind of out here having fun, and it kind of just gives me a weird feeling. I just don't like the feeling that the transaction left me in general. I would have liked to see them, trade bait, because here's the reality. If the AAF's first pick was Josh Johnson, the legend, the man, the myth himself, Josh Johnson, he was their very first pick. Okay, guy hasn't played in 50 years in the NFL, or professional football, and he was their number one pick for the league. I would go ahead and assume, and I'd put a value of Johnny Manziel worth about 3 to 5 Josh Johnsons. All right, and I'd say, you know what, Memphis, we'll take next year's number one, and we'll also take one of those nice D linemen you got over there that Mike Singletary picked out, and we need a punt returner. Give me Putnick from the Kevin Costner movie, but and then force them to get Johnny, but don't just give him away. What if he goes to your rival? What if some other team in your division's won in whatever, and you're just giving him to him, and then all of a sudden injury to your quarterback happens and they win out? Then what? You just gave him Johnny. So anyway, those were my thoughts on it. I don't like how it went down. If the league is going to just, give everybody pieces to play with, well, then tell us all that's what you're doing. So there you have it.
This is definitely understandable. Definitely understandable with them waiving their rights and not being known to the public and then changing it like that. It's very weird. Now, Michael, I want to turn it over to you. With Mettenberger getting hurt this weekend and then Hackenberg not doing anything with that team, and the third stringer showing a little promise this week, leading all the way up into this weekend's game. Michael, do you believe that Johnny could potentially start and beat out the other three?
I think at this particular point in time, I think it's pretty much a given. I mean, I don't think Hackenberg is ever going to see the field again. There's a good chance that Memphis will probably end up cutting him, honestly, with the move, depending on how severe Mettenberger's injury is. But with Mettenberg getting hurt, they could do one of two things. They could move Mettenberger to IR, claim that the injury is worse than it really is, and that way they can keep Hackenberg on the roster. If they don't do that, then Hackenberg was most likely a cut candidate. And then Brandon Silvers, he showed a lot of surprising poise in the game for coming in as a third stringer, and made a lot of really good throws, helped move the ball up and down a little bit. I know they didn't score a whole lot of points, but, they moved the ball pretty nicely for having him in. It's the complete opposite of what happened when San Diego's third stringer, Alex Ross, came in the game and he turned the ball over 4 times. Silver didn't really do that. So I think it made sense for Memphis to go get Manziel as soon as he was waived by San Antonio. And I think that when you're looking at, the way that the AAF has been with quarterbacks, pretty much playing on a little bit shorter of a leash, I don't know how Manziel's attitude is going to work with Singletary's hard-nosed style of coaching. So that will be something to keep an eye on. But I would say probably not this week coming up, week 7, but I would say probably by week 8, Manziel will get the start. At that point, Memphis will probably be out of the playoff hunt. But I think that you have at least an opportunity for Manziel to get a chance to showcase what he can do for at least, 2 to 3 games.
Definitely. And now, Coach, I wanted to save this for you. But we have a lot of players in the AAF that we know their history. There was, I believe, Woodside. He had some issues, and that's why he didn't really make it in the league, and now he's in the AAF. Do you think with Johnny being this highly profiled character in the football world, with all of his off-the-field antics, with the money sign and the rehabilitation and partying like no other and being disrespectful and stuff, in a coach's standpoint and in the mindset of the league right now, what are you trying to show with this acquisition? Do you think it's just going to be a money grabber and people are going to come watch because it's Johnny, or do you think he might mess up again with his antics and bring a bad name to the AAF?
Well, first and foremost, I think the good thing for the AAF is where they are in their season. And so Johnny should be able to be on his good behavior for the amount of time that's left in this particular season. It's always a catch-22 about what you want to bring into your organization, even when you're not winning. You don't want to bring in somebody so detrimental that they just bring the overall culture down. But at some point, Johnny Football has to realize, he's on a football lifeline, so to speak, and he could be on football life support. So again, a good window for him to come in here. But John made some good points about how the allocation and the so-called pickup of Johnny Manziel by Memphis at the end of the day, purely a move with everybody who can see where Memphis is really heading, not winning a lot of ball games, purely a move to help keep their ticket sales and keep their attendance figures at a reasonable number. And I think having Johnny Manziel on the team can do that for you if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking to win football games, it's a tough task to take on, even for a person who has everything together. You're just coming in a short period of time, got to learn a system and step on the field. So, this is the kind of league that Johnny Manziel ought to excel in, despite his lack of size and this and that. There's lack of size everywhere in this league. That's why some of these guys are here. They have something to prove. So this could be a good situation for him to get in here and play 3 or 4 football games potentially and run around and make some things happen. I see more positive things for Johnny Manziel if he's on his good behavior in the AAF than I do in the CFL.
Definitely. The one thing that was really surprising about this is that the fact that he even stated that he was looking into the XFL and the Alliance. But do you think with the fact that the Alliance is already here and the XFL isn't going to be here until next year. Michael, do you think that he's just here for the time being to show off what he has? And then could he do a 180 and go to the XFL next year?
Well, I honestly believe that this is Manziel's attempt at an attention grab. He wants to get a chance to give himself an opportunity, as much exposure as possible, to let people know, hey, I can still play. I don't know if there's an NFL team, especially considering his antics and then how his time ended in the CFL. I don't know if there's an NFL team that will give this guy an opportunity to be a starter or, make the team of any sort. There's a possibility a team might bring him to camp and then cut him. And I'm not sure what the AAF's contract, what the verbiage is for that. But if that happens, I can imagine that if Manziel was invited to camp and then got cut, that he would be an XFL starting quarterback next year. Between the way that the XFL wants to go about their business structure, the bigger cities, the higher profile contracts as far as the money's concerned, it would make sense for Manziel to want to go to a place like the XFL, get a chance to start and make a name for himself inside a different football league that's not the NFL. So I think that this is just more or less for him as an attention grab, and hope that he gets an opportunity to get out of that 3-year contract with the AAF by getting invited to a camp, and then if he gets cut, making the jump to the XFL and trying to be one of those tier one quarterbacks.
Right, and I kind of want to jump off this with something else because it kind of intertwines. When you look at high-profile players like that, let's look at it. Like we just saw, the Dolphins traded Ryan Tannehill to the Titans, and they have Marcus Mariota. Say this next year, they don't use Ryan, and then he's cut, and Ryan comes to the AAF, but then he thinks the same thing. Maybe he doesn't want the AAF. Maybe he wants the XFL. Do you think that players might see Johnny as an opportunity to be like, yeah, I'm not a starter in the NFL, but I can start here. And then if I want to choose between the two, I can do that. And do you think that'll just cause problems everywhere, or do you think that could create like a merger? John, you tell me.
Ask me that question again. Ask the question again.
Okay, the question is, do you think with how Johnny might, this is a whole hypothetical, if Johnny were to do that, he comes to the AAF, he shows off, gets invited to a camp, gets cut, goes to the XFL. Do you think other NFL quarterbacks who have potential and then drop out do the same thing? And do you think that could create a mishap with the leagues, or do you think that could bring them together as like a merger?
You're referring to AAF quarterbacks?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first of all, Bill Parcells said a long time ago, you treat everybody fair, but you don't treat them all the same. And he said that quote, which is a great quote. You treat everybody fair, but not everybody the same, when referring to how he dealt with Lawrence Taylor. And Lawrence Taylor, of course, is another guy who's crazier than, that guy was nuts. Okay. And he, they asked him, how'd you deal with the guy? Well, you got to deal with him. He dealt with T.O. too, and sure, you deal. You can cut a guy who's a special teamer and late for practice or late for meetings, who's expendable, but you're probably not going to cut Lawrence Taylor for the same thing. Yes, you'll treat the special teamer fair, but you're not going to treat him as equally as you're treating LT. And I think in that regards with Johnny, I'm pretty sure his contract, he was able to finagle a 1-year deal. Say, hey, look, I'm not being tied to $83,333 prorated for 3 years. I'm sorry. I'm just not doing that. I will play for the duration of this year, and we can see what happens beyond that. but my name is Johnny Manziel, and you currently don't have anybody in the league named Johnny Manziel. So if you want me to play, I'll play for your 83 prorated this year. We can talk about the rest at season's end. And I think he did that, and I don't know this for a fact, but I would believe he did that to leave the door open for the XFL, and I'm pretty sure the league knows that, and he knows that, and the XFL knows that too, and so does the NFL in that regards, for that matter. So I don't think it would set an example for other players in this league currently that are signed up. They knew that their 3-year deal when they started this thing was 3 years shy of the NFL Players Association and league collective bargaining agreement. So it doesn't surprise me that they made a 3-year outline for their contracts, because obviously the NFL is going to be making some changes in 3 years. So, and then I think the AAF will relook at how they do things. And I don't think there'd be hard feelings between any of these leagues if he were to move over, to the XFL, to greener pastures. If in fact he's still got it, he can play. The XFL wants him and he wants to go. I think it's more power to everybody. It helps the AAF this year. All right. And it opens up a quarterback position for somebody else in the AAF if he leaves. And the XFL get a player, so it's great for spring football all around. And oh, by the way, he's a name. People know Johnny Manziel. People really don't know, Gilbert so much. But people know who Johnny Manziel is, oh, by the way. And, for him to go from one league to another, spring football, leagues that people aren't even aware are actually playing, or existing or thinking about coming back and playing next year. I think that would be news. That would move the needle a little bit. So, I think it would be an exciting thing to see as a fan, and I think it would be good for both leagues. But I don't really have any of these players in the AAF being really good enough right now to walk away from their contract and feel confident enough that they can have a long career and make millions and bajillions, as Dr. Evil would say, in the XFL or anywhere else for that matter right now.
All righty. Now, it's been brought up a bunch about how the XFL is doing everything when it comes to how much they're paying for stuff, the fact that Vince McMahon wants this to rival the NFL. So with them paying and putting out so much, how do you think, with all the marketing exposure that they've done, Michael, what do you think is going to happen day one, the first game of the season, with attendance? Do you think that people are going to show up, or do you think it might be mediocre like the AAF was opening day?
Honestly, the way that the XFL has gone about their press coverage and the way that they've made their announcements, there's been a lot of hype and a lot of speculation surrounding, the XFL cities. That was pretty big on my timeline. Alone, I would just see people that I didn't even, know that were looking forward to the XFL. I have a couple, people up here that I talk to football with pretty much every day. And at first, when I told them that the XFL was coming back, their first thought was like, oh, well, that's going to fail, or, oh, I don't expect it to succeed. And then we started talking about the coaches. I continue talking to them about it and just keep letting them know about how things are going and what they're doing. And, the coaches start coming in, and all of a sudden they're starting to get intrigued. Somebody I never thought that I would ever hear that they were looking forward to the XFL just told me the other day that they can't wait for the season to start next year. So I think the XFL's done a very smart job of doing it. But at the same time, I think they need to curb their expectations with attendance, because I still think there is going to be that stigma surrounding it, considering it's Vince McMahon, and professional wrestling doesn't always have the best reputation. And then with the failure that happened in XFL 2000, I think that they're going to have to curb their expectations. So I think that the attendance is going to be really strong, but I just don't think it's going to quite reach the potential that it should, at least in the first week or so. But if they can improve the quality of the play over the XFL 2000, which I highly expect them to do, I think that the XFL is going to thrive by the year end a lot better than people are expecting.
I really do hope so. Now, Coach, I want to talk to you about this, but with the players that are going to go to the XFL, whether they're former players or they're players trying to just get exposure, do you think they're hesitant because the AAF has NFL connections and their players are potentially able to get on the practice squads and training camps to shoot their shot with the NFL? Or do you think they don't even care? They're just like, this is my time to play football again or better and against highly competitive competition? Do you think they're going to crack under pressure, or do you think they're just going to see how it goes? Coach?
Okay. I think the opportunity to play 11-man football is really what it's about. And if you can play, you will get the opportunity to play at the highest level, which is the National Football League. I think the AAF and the XFL, I think playing in those leagues, you are a football player almost / entertainer as well, because there's going to be such a low percentage of guys that even make it from these leagues to the NFL. That's why the USFL was so incredible. How many people actually were able to etch out careers in the NFL, with several of them, a couple of them actually being Hall of Fame careers. So it's an opportunity to play football. Your football lifeline is short. So I feel like, if you're young and you fit that player profile that the NFL really looks like from an age and experience and a skill set standpoint, if you can play, you'll get that opportunity. But again, we all know that'll be a small percentage, whether it's the AAF or the XFL.
Definitely. And it's one of those things. The AAF jumped into it. They jumped quick. They had their preseason, and then now we're in the regular season. We've had games that were very highly touted that people considered could be NFL level, but then you have games throughout the weeks that are small. You look at the games and it's just like, oh, this could be like a backyard football thing, or this could be high school or college. They look at it, and some games are NFL caliber, while others are showing the colors of these players, of why they're here. They're trying to show out. They're trying to set an example, knowing that they have a really high chance of making it onto a team, whether it be practice squad or second, third, fourth on the depth chart. But with the XFL, it seems like they're just trying to throw all the punches. They're letting you know. It's just like, hey, we're doing this right. We're letting you know that it's here. It's not ready yet, but we're building towards it. We have the money for it and everything. Now, there were a couple of things that came out this week of how they could name these teams, even the ones that haven't been unveiled yet for the XFL, and some that have been shown, like DC, Tampa Bay, and a few others. When it seeing as we have the Fleet, we have the Commanders, the Apollos, Legends, Iron, all of them in the AAF, and their uniform designs. Michael, do you think the XFL is going to be flashy, or do you think they're going to be kind of the same as Alliance with having subpar like uniform?
Well, I mean, I honestly, I don't think the AAF uniforms are subpar. To me, anyways, I feel like that they did a very good job. I feel like Starter did a fantastic job for putting together a set of uniforms in a relatively short amount of time. A couple of color scheme issues and a couple of uniforms looking similar, but I think overall they've done a pretty good job of putting out a high quality uniform. As far as the XFL is concerned, I think that they had the extreme flashy, uniform back in 2000, and I think that sort of led to a little bit of people not taking it seriously. So I wouldn't expect outrageous uniforms that are flashy. You'll probably get a couple different color schemes. I would imagine that they'll probably try to look at focusing, different color schemes that don't necessarily work that might work, or they might toy with it a little bit because they're going to have to differentiate themselves from the AAF and the NFL. But I can't imagine that we're going to see anything that's going to be too off the wall or too outrageous, at least right off the bat. I am interested though to find out who they're going to pair with to make the uniforms, because the NFL has a pretty extensive contract with several uniform makers, and with the AAF taking starter, it's going to be interesting to see what XFL comes up with and who they're going to pair with to create these uniforms for sure.
True. Well, see, that kind of brings in the tie-ins with WWE, because WWE has contracts with Tap Out, they have Under Armour, they have their fair share of companies that make clothing as well. And now we haven't seen anything like Tap Out in any really kind of sport other than I think maybe baseball and soccer. We've seen Tap Out wear. Do you think maybe Tap Out could be a potential candidate, Michael?
Well, I believe Tap Out is actually owned by Under Armour. I don't quote me 100% on that, but I believe I had read a deal that Under Armour had bought Tap Out a couple of years back. And if Under Armour, if they want to dabble in the football uniforms, I think Under Armour would be a good, a good company to work with as far as the XFL is concerned. They make pretty high quality athletic wear already. I just don't know if they've ever thought about dabbling into the professional sports world. So there's a possibility that they could do that. I don't know about companies like Adidas, or Reebok of any sort. I'm not really 100% sure, on that. I don't know if Coach might have a little more insight to some of those stuff with his experience with the Arena Football League. But I'm going to kind of keep an eye on it. Under Armour is a very, good company, and there's a good possibility that it could be something in the works there, because they do have that working relationship with the WWE, or at least Tap Out anyways.
Well, since you brought it up, Coach, any insight on what you might think about which company could work for uniforms with WWE, like Tap Out, Under Armour?
I really don't have that much insight, but to be quite frank with you, I'd be highly surprised if it wasn't Under Armour. This just seems like something that's right up their alley, and Under Armour does a nice job on uniforms on various different levels. And like I, just said, kind of behind the scenes with you guys, let's not try and reinvent the football uniform. And I feel like the AF's done an excellent job with that. I don't like some of the color schemes, me personally, but does that mean that they're bad uniforms? No, it doesn't. So overall, I think they've done an outstanding job giving their leagues, 8 teams, a good professional look. And again, I feel like Under Armour is, I feel like they're almost the XFL can swing and hit a home run with Under Armour.
Definitely. John, what are your thoughts about the uniforms and how the AAF has gone about it in XFL? What company could be with them?
It's been a long time since I've watched wrestling, as a regular watcher. But I just happened to, when you brought up the topic of uniforms and things like that, the first thing that came into my mind was back in the day, I was buying Austin 316 and NWO T-shirts, and way back. When I would stand in a Hex Ticketmaster, 2 hours before they'd open on a day that a pay-per-view ticket was going to be available. You'd have to get all the tickets as fast as you can and all that. Anyway, so I just happened to look on WWEshop.com, and Michael was saying I wasn't even aware that they were with Tap Out. I didn't even know that. I'm a bit not too much on the current affairs, but I did notice that they sell a WrestleMania jersey. It looks kind of fly. It's a football jersey on their website, right there on their shop under apparel. I clicked jerseys and boom, there was a pretty good looking jersey there. So, but you could barely see the tag on the back of the neck, and it looked like it had the WWE symbol, and I couldn't see a the maker. So maybe they're just keeping that one in house, but it said 50/50 or nylon polyester or whatever it said. And it looked like a pretty nice jersey. Under Armour, coach, was absolutely spot on. I can tell you guys that the school that I send my children to, their principal went to high school with one of the two brothers that are the owners of Under Armour, the Plank brothers. One of them went to St. John's High School, and the other one went to Georgetown Prep High School, which is where my pops coaches football and has been coaching football since Christ was a corporal. Matter of fact, he's got Kevin Plank's son playing tight end for him these last couple years. He's a nice young athlete. Anyway, Under Armour is very active in this area. They do my children's gym stuff. I got a gym bag sitting on the other side of this room made by Under Armour. It's gorgeous. And it cost me $35 from the school store that my kids go to. And they do Maryland University. Am I wrong? Do they do Oregon? Are they the ones that make them fly outfits that Oregon uses? I don't know. But they are very innovative in their styles, the stripes on the pants or half stripes, two-tone colors, things like that. They're all about it. And then, of course, hell, I've got a half a dozen sweatsuits and gym shorts down there, and muscle shirts too. Not that I'm busting out of any shirt I own, but you know what I mean? They are very nice. This is the wave of the future. Their material, it's out there on the street, man. You've got street credibility goes up 10% if you're rocking Under Armour around these parts, because that is a local product. We've got a team here where they are born, where Under Armour's born. We've got a team here, Connecticut, which is the headquarters of the XFL. It ain't that far up 95. So it would not surprise me if they got into bed with Under Armour. You think of Adidas is a name. The owner of Adidas and Puma are brothers, but they've never really dipped into football. If my memory serves me correct, I don't recall those two names. The soccer, yes, some other stuff, but I've never really heard their names associated with football. I can't imagine the XFL would want to take the RC challenge with Puma or Adidas. So Under Armour, I think, is where it's at. And since I'm quite frankly surprised the big boys, the NFL hasn't jumped on board with them. But knowing how much price your Under Armour can be in a Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever than some of the other stuff that's out these days, they probably gave the NFL a number that the owners didn't feel like paying. What else is new? So that's probably why they're not making uniforms for them. So that would be a good decision. If I were the one calling the shots for the XFL, I'd probably call the Under Armour brothers.
Very true. Now, I know that the NFL has their own contracts with multiple different companies, but there are players that they have their own contracts with certain apparels. And Under Armour does cleats like it's nothing, and you see those around the league most of the time in the NFL. So I think that's the only way we've seen Under Armour apparel in football, because it's more player contracts with the company more so than the NFL itself. Because I know Nike is a huge, huge brand for the NFL. But that's going to do it for this weekend's episode. I'm your host, Kevin, and Michael, John, and Coach are all here with us tonight. That's going to do it for our show. And everyone, have a wonderful evening.